Right on. Mackenzie, what's new and exciting, man?
It's been good. I think, 2023, I would say last quarter of 2022, there's rumblings of, recession and slowdown and
Countless things.
yeah,
Yeah.
just skies falling. But I think after the last few years of just perpetual uncertainty, I think everyone's taking a bit of that with a grain of salt and day by day, but we haven't really seen, the slowdown. I think that's one of the benefits of the mid-market is that a few points on your cost of capital or some of those things that maybe if you're a pension fund, you have to weigh more into your investment decisions, don't kind of come to bear as much in this space. And so it's been kind of busy as usual.
Yeah. So we're specifically here to talk about financial due diligence, maybe within the context of mid-market M&A. So maybe for those, you're pretty well known in Calgary, but for those that don't know you, maybe explain specifically what we're referring to with financial due diligence and maybe where Kalos fits in.
Yeah, definitely. So at a macro level, financial due diligence is really the idea of confidence. And so when you look at a merger and acquisition situation, there's somebody who needs to be at the table who's independent and objective and really just looking at, is this a good deal? I'm not getting a success fee or commission, or I'm not tied to this in any way. I'm just going to come in and give the facts. So when you look at potential financiers, whether that's your investors who are cutting equity checks or the banks, they want to know that someone had a seat at the table who is just looking at the fundamentals of the deal and whether it all goes around. And so I often kind of equate financial due diligence to a home inspection. It's the idea of before you buy a house, someone, you wouldn't say to your home inspector, I'm only paying you if you buy this house,
Mm-hmm.
if I buy this house, but please go tell me what's wrong with it. It doesn't work. So we're kind of that, call it independent third party vet check that, this all goes around before people hit play on their transactions. And where Kalos fits into that was in my past life, I was a manager at one of the big four firms. And once you start to kind of get more senior, you start to see, where we're fitting in the market. And just a lot of those mid-market deals just aren't big enough to make sense for the big four to take on. And, in fairness to them, when they're dealing with the major pension funds and the really big guys, and there's an opportunity cost there that if they're tying up their team on some of these smaller transactions, it just doesn't make sense for them. But it started to beg the question of, well, where did these deals go? If they can't get access to big four. And so it just felt like there's an opportunity there to take, that big four bench strength, people have been there, done that, and have all that acumen and package it and bring it to the mid-market. And for us, I think part of the fun in that is when you're working on some of those larger transactions, it can feel a little bit more like a tick the box exercise where you're dealing with very sophisticated clients who know what they're doing. And oftentimes in the mid-market space, we have people who are absolutely brilliant at running their business, but M&A is just a whole other different animal. And so you really feel like you can be a trusted advisor and bring that experience to the table and be more of a strategic partner in that way.
Yeah, mid-market in general, like you could probably say this about any type of advisor or small and medium-sized businesses. Like they need help probably more than a large corp does. They don't have the capacity in-house. Again, they didn't go and get a bunch of financing education in school or whatever the gap is. But the balance though is it can be really the economics can be really difficult, and maybe on top of that, convincing them that your services are worth the price.
Yeah.
That can be a real challenge. How do you navigate that?
I think sometimes the difficulty in that is you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
with us, we've been on deals and we've seen where we've added value and but clients who've never been through that process don't necessarily know what they're signing themselves up for. And so it's hard to articulate, well, these are all the reasons that you need to matter, that this matters or that you need to care. So I think for us, it's interesting. We're actually going through the process right now of redoing our website. And so we were talking about just the entire sales cycle and how you articulate that. We're going through that piece by piece. And one of the things that our provider was telling us was like, you can't hang out quality or service as something as a pre-sales unique value proposition. No one's going to believe that your quality or your service is better before they've worked with you. That's a post-sales item. Because everyone is going to say that they have great service and quality. So that can't be a distinguishing feature up front. And you start to digest that and you go, oh, yeah, okay, no, that's fair. But then how do you convince? And so I think for us, what I enjoy about the mid-market is that I think there's a space in the mid-market for really building long-term relationships that feel like strategic partnerships, as opposed to I need to monetize this exact moment or it's not going to make sense. And so I think for us, we're more of let's have a conversation. Let's understand your situation. If we can add value and there's a scope of work here, great. If not, and all this is one meeting and we give you a few pointers and you go on your way, that's great too. And I think we've just always had the mentality of if the stars align and it's a fit, we're going to do business together. And if not, that's okay too. And I think part of the benefit of being a boutique firm is we're not trying to be all things to all people. We're not trying to have 1,000 clients. We're trying to find the right people that we can add value to their situation. And if you're able to establish that trust and rapport and the opportunity comes up where you can add value to that situation, then you can trust that business will get done, eventually. But I'd also think that's maybe something just true of Calgary and Western Canada is you don't lead with the hard sales. Like that's just, I think our culture is a little bit more, let's build a relationship, and if there's an opportunity to do business down the road, then we will. But I think if you start with that, you're kind of turning people off from the get-go.
I think that's taken me like an alarming amount of time to learn.
Yeah.
I think you had the benefit of doing that when I worked in a bank where there was always another deal coming in. So you had the latitude of being kind of transactional.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you get out of the bank and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, that doesn't work anymore. Right. And you're right. Without getting into specifics and being kind of vague about what I'm talking about. I mean, I've really kind of come to realize that you really have to focus on the relationship, not the deal. Yeah. And that could be as simple as just a no strings attached introduction.
Yep.
Or free advice. And yeah, you're going to be abused. Like your time is going to be abused by certain people. And, there's probably a point where you're going to cut somebody off. But yeah, there's a bigger picture to building a business there. And, unfortunately, it took me until I'm about 38 to figure that out.
Well, and I think, for us, one of the things we've always just believed in and kind of the background behind the name Kalos is Kalos was the Greek word for good and was used historically to refer to warriors who held themselves to the highest moral standard on the battlefield. And that integrity is central to everything we do. And we always felt in the absence of financial due diligence really existing in the middle market, you're not necessarily being that good steward of capital. And we really wanted to bring that to the space. But then you got to walk the talk. And so we actually killed probably about the first 17 deals that prospective buyers brought to us.
That's hard. That's hard to do when you're starting up.
Yeah.
You want to get every deal done.
No, exactly. So you're like, but we took the long-term view of, we could tell them, sign the LOI and let's go and, get the fee. But, you got to act in the best interest of your client. And, the first 5, 10, maybe even 15, you're like, yep, no, this isn't good. Let's try again. By the
16
time,
and 17.
yeah, by 16 and 17, you're like, oh, please, let's get one that's gonna work. But I think, that's to your point in the middle market and relational. And how sometimes in the bigger institutions it can be a bit more transactional. I think one of my pain points in my past life is we'd often trained our clients just don't even pick up the phone till you have a signed LOI. Mm-hmm. This is the point you call us. And, as someone who wants to make a difference for their clients, sometimes you'd get that LOI and you'd spend 10, 15 minutes with it and you'd be like, here, and, the moment that's paper and signed, that's hard to pivot from. So what we've told our clients is, hey, like, if you're thinking of an LOI and you want us to take a look at it, let's just do that. Because for me, I'd rather kill a deal before the LOI is even signed and make sure, like, what's the point to getting 6 months down the road and killing it on the background? It's a waste of the target's time, the sell side's advisor's time, our client's time, the cost, all of it. Let's get to one that's going to work. And because of that, in the entirety of Kalos, we've only ever had 2 deals post LOI that haven't closed. And and those were more deal fit issues than they were diligence. So I think for us, it's, in the spirit of good faith, if the economics or whatever aren't going to go around up front, let's either negotiate that into the LOI and see if we can fix that around, or walk away, but let's not tie this deal up for 6-9 months if it's not going to close anyways.
Superior advice is really how you avoid becoming a bit of a commoditized offering, right? Like otherwise you're just a price taker. You're just taking paper over here and sending paper over there, and it's not really a sustainable business model, right?
No, I think to me it's like, you'll get your quality of earnings report. Yeah. You'll get your paper. But this is the bar of just cycling through QV reports. And it's interesting in terms of part of that website process was going and getting some referrals from clients, and a common theme in pretty much every single one of them is like, we get our quality of earnings report and it does what it needs to do, but that's not why we're excited about working with Kalos. It's all the intangible things of them picking up a phone call past midnight or on a weekend, or they're there when it matters, or they give us all these intangible pieces of advice throughout the entire process that are what moves the needle for us. It's quality of earnings report does what it needs to do, and it's all well and good, but if that's what you're hanging your hat on, then I think you're in trouble.
You think about trying to create a moat around the business too. The advice is difficult to replicate. Like your experience was acquired over however long. Yeah. It's not something that can be purchased and replicated across the street. That's your moat. Like honestly, that superior advice is the moat.
Our team is the moat. And as simplistic as maybe this sounds, my view as managing partner is I take care of the team and the team takes care of the client. Yeah. And my job as a leader is to make sure our team's happy. Because I think the finance industry as a whole, often the churn, it's just not often a sustainable place.
You're talking about the banks or just in general?
Banks, the big four, and it's deal urgency and deal timing is tough, and a lot of cultures aren't built with the idea of making it a sustainable career path, and they're okay with the idea that people are going to come in for a year or two and leave. And for me, when selfishly, when I looked at my own career path, I love financial due diligence. I'm passionate about it, and it's something I wanted to do for the rest of my career, and I looked at my ability to do that within the pathways that existed at the time, and I just wasn't sure it was a sustainable path for me. Mm-hmm. And I also felt like there had to be other professionals who felt the same, and so part of Kalos, as much as we saw a need on the client end, selfishly I also saw a need on the professional end of, can we create a place for people who love what they do but don't necessarily love where they do it, and really put the team first and build a culture and have a team where, I'm not necessarily naive enough to believe this is always going to be the case forever, but everyone who's joined has joined with the idea this is the last place they ever want to work. And we actually want to build a team and have that culture. And I think that shows through when the most junior person on our team has 5 years of experience. It's everyone on our team has been there, done that, has had training from top firms across the world, and now we're taking people who love this and putting them under one roof. And I think that's part of what's fun is Not necessarily having a traditional hiring model either. Taking really smart, capable people who maybe don't have the exact specific background, because financial due diligence is just such a niche space, and training them up. So, there's a guy on our team, as an example, comes from 5 years of private equity as his background. Never specifically done financial due diligence before, but he's been around however many deals. You can take that guy and train him, how to do that. But then he also brings such a valuable lens for a lot of our financial sponsors and private equities, is he's been in their shoes. He gets it. And so when I look across our team, we've got people who've done investment banking, we've got people who've done valuations, we've got people who've actually been in private equity, management consulting. And so we're bringing that diversity of thought to the table as well when we're executing.
You ever see the movie Moneyball?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Taking a third baseman and saying, you'd be good, I don't know, as a catcher or whatever. I don't know baseball. But.
No, it's yeah, I think it's the idea that, the technical is trainable. And so if you've got people, to your point, of the raw materials and show aptitude and give them the right environment and coaching, they're going to be successful. And that ability to take the long-term view, because it can take a year or so to get someone, up to speed. And, if their tenure in another institution is only going to be a year, you're not going to make that investment. So there's, I think, a lot of things when you can take the longer-term view to building value that we're able to do that you might not otherwise.
You're getting a lot of people up to speed, because it seems like you're hiring somebody every other week, just based on the LinkedIn postings.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Kalos turns 4 this year, which it feels like you blink and you're like, sorry, what? But 2022 was really a transformative year for us in a lot of ways. And we had our first $5 billion plus fund come to us and ask us to run a deal for them basically about a year ago. And I think before that, we had gained really great traction with family office, smaller private equity firms, but nothing kind of in the billions. And I think there was a lot of institutions out there who had kind of heard our name, were starting to maybe pay attention. And then all of a sudden you work with one multi-billion-dollar fund and others are like, okay, let's go. And so I would say kind of come June, July, about 50% of our deals were actually US-based clients, and working with a few multi-billion-dollar firms kind of across North America. And it just took off in ways that I don't think I could have ever envisioned, if I'm being honest. And one of the things I'm always really cognizant of as a boutique is the idea of agility. And so deal urgency is a thing, and clients don't want to hear you don't have capacity. And so we've never not taken a deal on, and we've never not turned it around in, the 2-3 weeks or whatever the timeline needed to be for that deal. And I remember one of our top clients was in a situation where they were looking to do the take private of a division of a public company. And the pubco, they had 3 buyers at the table, and the pubco basically went, look, you've got, all of you are kind of in the same give take on valuation and terms and everything else. So Ty's going to go to the fastest person who can get this done. And we would like the entire due diligence process to last 8 days. The end. and the CEO kind of just looks across the table at me. I'm like, we're not going to be the reason you don't get the deal. So you need to get this done in 8 days. We'll get it done in 8 days. And so there's, kind of a obligation in a way to make sure that we keep capacity available for our clients who need to be able to execute quickly. And I could get a phone call this afternoon, and we just have to be able to answer the call literally and deliver. So one of the things that my partner Travis has been amazing for is we did 4 software implementations last year. And it's just anything we can automate or lean on analytics or artificial intelligence or anything we can get like the computers to do, we are. But to your point, it's that trusted advice that is really the differentiating factor. And so we got to make sure we're always in market recruiting and understanding who our next hires are, and keeping that bench strength of the team and staying ahead of it. But
the technology is a big part of keeping bandwidth
for sure
for higher value tasks like advice, right? Like if you're bogged down in Excel inputs, well, I mean, how deep can you think about a big topic? It's tough.
No, and you will lose the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
That's the danger, right? And I think even just from a morale standpoint, so we had, so back when it was Travis and I, right in the aftermath of COVID, the Calgary Chamber of Commerce came to us and said, we're putting on a series called Here for YYC, where we're bringing in various subject matter experts to do a kind of a session. Everyone's going to have their own topic, and we're going to blast that out across all of the members so that people can get the advice they need in these tough times. And I think it was 2:33 in the morning, and I'm going through the presentation deck, and I've asked Travis to review it for me, and we had a few other deals and other things on the go, and out of just basically sheer exhaustion, he took a page and literally just said "bad redo" on the top of the page and like handed it to me, and it's all those like little formatting things, right? And so one of the softwares we invested in,
my wife would have divorced me if I did.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those moments where you're like, at 2:33 in the morning, getting a chart in PowerPoint to do what you needed to do, it's just not value added and not where you want to spend your time. So I think so we invested in a platform that oversits your entire office suite, and you literally write your brand kit rules into it. And it will live link your Excel to your PowerPoint. So if you change something in the Excel and you hit refresh in the PowerPoint, it'll auto live everything. But it also has all of your brand rules. So if I get a report and I hit like brand audit, it'll literally go, this is off. So we did all the formatting rules for our charts, wording, tables, all of it. And so the team isn't, spending hours on every single report, making sure things are aligned or in the right font color.
Bullets over here.
Yeah, just stuff, right? And that's the thing that, it's one thing to be up at whatever time in the morning on the weekend because you feel like you're adding value and you're delivering. It's another if you feel like you're monkeying around with all these stupid little
Format's
things.
a huge thing.
But I think we've talked about this before, that those little things matter, and they add a certain level of polish and credibility. Like if I'm a banker and I get a report and the formatting seems off, I almost immediately discount the content. So the polish has got to be there, but can we get there in ways that aren't bending the goodwill of the teams?
It's a line, right? Like you're right. It's a big thing in the banks for sure. You write a document, how you write it, your wording, it becomes a whole thing in that sometimes it can be taken too far.
Yeah.
Right? There's an 80-20 rule there. There's a Pareto's law that should be considered. And if we're on to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th iteration of this document, like what's the marginal benefit of this additional version? Like there's some point somebody's got to shut it down. But the culture, sometimes a culture can become so stifled with that stuff. I don't know how once your culture is kind of fallen victim to that perfection, I don't know how you undo it.
Well, and I think there's a difference between understanding where the perfection is value added versus where it's not. And one of the things I'm extremely cognizant of now that we're more often in situations where we're in RFPs against very well-known brands is that any little chink in the armor can be enough to go, maybe we'll just go with the known. And we had someone join us after about 10 years at one of the big fours, and that was probably one of their biggest adjustments. Was they were kind of used to the idea of they could send something out, and if a comma was out of place or this or that, you've got a big four brand on the letterhead. People aren't really caring that much. They've built a brand where they can do that. They've got the reputation for it. And for us, it was like we're too new. Like it's just got to be there.
Why don't we talk about why somebody should hire a due diligence advisor, especially because in mid-market, I think one, they might not even know that they can employ somebody for that, but two, I'm guessing in a lot of cases they think that they have to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe three, they don't necessarily know what they don't know, like you said earlier. So,
yeah, I think for us, there's a few different elements to that. So there's certain clients we work with who have maybe never done a deal before. I'd say a good chunk of our clients actually have never done a deal before. So there's that element of you don't know what you don't know, and you need someone you can trust at the table who actually has that objective point of view. And so I think a lot of our clients in that angle, they know what they're good at, they know what they're not, and they want to bring someone to the table who's going to help them fill that gap. And that becomes a pretty natural hiring decision. I think, when you look at some of our private equities or multi-billion-dollar funds, it's like they know what they're doing. So if you know what you're doing, like why do you need an outside advisor? And I sometimes kind of point to the analogy of in the medical profession, you don't treat your family. There's a certain, you get too close to something. If you've been working on a deal for a year and you've gotten attached to it, you might need someone else kind of at the table who's going to just go, hey, objectively, I get why you've kind of fallen in love with this deal, but let's maybe pump the brakes a little bit and talk about some of the aspects here. And I think, the difficult thing often as a due diligence advisor is the number one worst thing we can do is let our clients go forward with the deal they shouldn't do. But the number two is to kill a deal. So you're always in the kind of this push-pull of no one likes a dead deal, but at the end of the day, you're going to be happy it got killed if it needed to get killed, instead of just closing this thing and owning this thing now that is going to be nothing but headaches. But I think the right advisor finds solutions, not just problems. And that goes back to that trusted advice piece of, here's the things that are red flags, but let's discuss about how we can fix them, as opposed to just being an advisor of like, here's your red flags. And that's, I think, the piece where you can be an elevated due diligence provider, is not just finding the risks, but finding ways to mitigate them and move forward with the idea of, my client would like to get this deal done, so let's see how we can get it across the finish line, as opposed to, I'm only adding value by giving you 100 findings. Like that's not really how it works.
Do you have like a broad example of, here's a flag, but here's how we might deal with it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about deals is it's never the same thing twice. But I think broadly speaking, in the mid-market, there's a few different things that come up fairly regularly. And with owner operators who've maybe never had an independent point on their value, often the most difficult thing is even just getting to the LOI, because they have a certain number in their head of what their company's worth. And a sophisticated PE is going to go, well, actually, if we look at the numbers here, this is what it's worth. And I often find structuring can be a good bridge for that. Whenever there's kind of a differing point on value, there's ways that, if often owners are like, oh, well, I don't necessarily need all the cash up front. Okay, well, maybe vendor financing is a good way to bridge that gap, or there's ways around it. So I often find kind of the structuring, financing, valuation piece is one of the initial bigger hurdles. And then often also in the mid-market, there's the idea of, is there commercial goodwill there? Has the owner done enough to make themselves redundant for their business? And what is that transition plan? And how are we going to go about that in a way that the legacy can be preserved and we can transition the relationships, and maybe there's really good bench strength within the existing team. But that can be difficult too if an owner, we often call it the vacation test. Like if the owner can't go on vacation for a couple of weeks without the business grinding to a halt, then that's difficult to buy and have the owner not be a part of it post-close.
Yeah, they're the sales team, they're the collections team, whatever. The smaller the company, probably the bigger the issue. But
yeah, and I think there's always little things too around, tax structuring, or something accounting comes out of, skeleton in the proverbial closet or all those different things. But I think, when you have, all of our clients kind of go into diligence with the idea that it's a confirmatory exercise. They're not going in to, try to grind down the purchase price or to re-rank valuation, but every once in a while something comes up and you do need to kind of go, okay, well, how can we still make this deal work? And I think that's part of the fun, is you're always thinking of new creative ways of getting that across the finish line.
Yeah, I was working through a deal with somebody, buying a business, first time buying a bit, well, second time buying a business, but we just closed the other one like a month ago, so it doesn't really count. No young individual, no direct experience in the business that they're buying, and so the lenders were really having a hard time with transition risk. And there was a VTB, and there was an employment contract to keep the vendor on, but it didn't seem like it was going to be enough. And so really where the financing was leading, and the problem is the financing almost seems to be the number one reason deals don't close.
Yeah.
Where the financing was leading was that the lenders might only entertain it if the vendor stayed on for equity.
Interesting.
Right? So whether it be 30% or 40%, that can be tough when you're talking about a vendor and a buyer that really just met.
Yeah.
Right. So have you ever been faced with a transaction where that went through successfully?
Yeah, we have a few clients, and this tends to work better with our financial sponsor clients, because there's a natural division. And so as a financial sponsor, they're going to bring the capital to the table and some relationships, and they often like to call it smart capital, where, we'll maybe sit on the board or we'll do other things.
But they're not putting in ownership, management.
No, like if they can come into a situation, they'll be the first to admit, I'm not an operator. I don't know your day-to-day business. Yeah. I know business and I know financials and strategy, and I can bring a lot to the table, but I'm not going to go in as CEO and run this thing. And so I think for owners who maybe have a little bit of gas still left in the tank and aren't afraid of the idea of another 3 to 5 years in the business, finding the right strategic partner in a financial sponsor could be a win-win, where they don't want to be in the day-to-day operational decisions anyways, and you can kind of continue to run. It is, I think, if we're calling a spade though, like 9 times out of 10, you've got an owner-operator who's built the business for decades, is used to being the 100% owner, and is used to calling the shots.
Not super coachable.
Well, and they have an idea of that business, yeah, and how they want it to run. Yeah. And rightfully so, they built it from scratch. Yeah. But it can be hard to not be the one who gets to call the shots anymore. Mm-hmm. And some people, through the course of the transaction, think that maybe they'll be okay with that. But inevitably, a year or two into that transition, it's like, they don't want to be there anymore. The new buyer doesn't want them to be there anymore. And sometimes that works really well. But I think it takes the vendor taking a good hard look of, can I still continue to be in the business I built and be second? And that's a hard transition.
Yeah, it's probably, I can only imagine it's hard to appreciate what the dynamic's actually going to be like until you're already in it.
Live in it, yeah.
It's kind of too late. I mean, checks have been cashed.
Yeah.
Papers have been signed.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea of an equity role is difficult too, just even from a monetization angle. Mm-hmm. So with the knowledge of, maybe the vendor's going to stay on a year or two successfully, and then after that, then what? Yeah. Now they've got equity, and they've got to trust that the financial sponsor, whoever took it over, is going to run it in a way that there's pricing risk now on that equity and when it's going to get monetized and everything else. So I understand the proverbial skin in the game. Like, we want to know that people are still motivated. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to the idea that an equity role is the only way to accomplish that.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. I don't know what the right answer is, unfortunately, because if you're the buyer, that first time buyer, I mean, you have to start small. I guess the short answer is you have to start small, but it's chicken and egg, right? You're being ridiculed for not having experience running a business. And you're like, well, how do I get the experience running a business?
It kind of just seems like the deals industry at large, right? Like, it's
especially now, because there's just, once banks start failing, there's just a bit more uncertainty than there used to be.
I think that reputation, to your point, goes a long way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we're always mindful of, is that as advisors, we're extensions of our client's reputation at the table. Yeah. And so we're always wanting to make sure we're conducting ourselves in a way that how we're going to act is going to reflect on our client, and vice versa. So you want to be mindful of who you're working with and what deals you're working on. And I think that kind of just circles back to the idea of why we told our clients to pass on so many up front, because you tie yourself to the wrong tying yourself to a wrong deal at any point is tough. But if that's in your first few at bats, that's difficult to recover from.
Yeah, no, I get it. This is going to be a loaded question, but like, what's the scope of due diligence? I know it differs from deal to deal, but like, is there a scorecard that you start with when somebody comes to you?
Well, at the end of the day, if you look at what due diligence is trying to accomplish, it's comfort over the purchase price equation. And so if you're breaking that down, usually what happens is, in the letter of intent tends to stipulate a multiple. So the multiple piece is generally taken care of. But what are you applying that multiple to? And so the vetting of the EBITDA and making sure that the earnings are real, that there isn't kind of any accounting funny business, and quite literally the quality of those earnings are there. So it's not tied to, one customer 75% of their business and they could walk tomorrow, or all those different types of risks. And then when you continue to distill down the purchase price equation, there's, your net working capital, there's your CapEx, there's all the things around, at a high level, we're going to get to your enterprise valuation with your EBITDA times your multiple. But when we change valuation to price, what are the things that we need to consider here? And I would say all of those adjustments are around the idea of you're getting that business in the state it needs to exist in to earn the earnings you're paying for. So, the net working capital is your day-to-day capital in the business to run it. Your CapEx is your long-term property, plant, and equipment. And, things like net debt and debt-like, there isn't, a pending litigation or something out there that's going to come out of the woodwork the moment you close this deal that's going to impair your ability to do that going forward. So it all kind of comes back down to the idea of those earnings, but then also the infrastructure and capital surrounding those earnings that you need to actually do that. So I think one of the things about the mid-market is you need to be cognizant of not making a mountain out of a molehill. And so one of the reasons our team is so experienced is that in the lack of experience, you're going to take everything at the most detailed level possible, because you don't know where you can fly at 100,000 feet versus 50 versus 10, and where you need to drill down versus, okay, this isn't really a risk. So you're just going to do everything in minutia. But deal fatigue is a thing. So
I've lived that.
As a target, if you're getting 10-page request after 10-page request after 10-page request of all the things they need to do to satisfy diligence, your chances of that deal dying or even just eroding the rapport, like if an equity role or anything else, you have to be in business with this person after this deal closes. That's tough, right? So you want an advisor who's going to be mindful of, this is a real risk, and we do actually need to drill down on this, versus let's not make a mountain out of a molehill here and move on. And sometimes you put a rep and warranty or indemnify it and just paper it and move away. So That's, I think, one of the areas for us, and part of what I enjoy is we will a la carte scope everything we do. We're going to take a look at the deal, what the risks are, what potential hair is on it, and only do what's actually going to make sense for that specific deal. You don't need to do A to Z on everything.
I was talking to somebody that it's an off-market deal, so there's no M&A advisor. And I had Abby on last week, right? We're talking about the fact that an M&A advisor, sometimes a big part of their value is just keeping everybody at the table.
Yeah.
And keeping everybody calm and composed, because it gets tense,
It's
right?
emotional, for sure.
And so this person working on the off-market deal was going through a QV report, and the vendor was getting so worn down by the information requests, and it was really difficult for the buyer, because the buyer was having to be that person that was keeping the vendor contained. And the problem was the QV report came out and there was nothing adverse. And so from the buyer's perspective, holy Christ, that was such a poor use of time. I didn't learn anything new. It's like there would have only been value in the QV if a massive landmine was observed. I don't agree with that. The same way that I agree that you should have insurance even if you never use it.
Totally.
Right? You're trying to find certainty. But that can be really difficult, especially for maybe somebody that's not super experienced or astute, long in the tooth with respect to deals. And so it can be really difficult on subsequent deals for that person to ever want to go do a QV report again. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And I think that's where, it's understanding the idea between someone who's an expert versus someone who's just trying to check a box. And that's sometimes the danger, I think, of quality of earnings or financial due diligence, is that I think, and sometimes people feel like they've added value because they have found a lot of findings, or they wrote a really long report, or they did a lot of procedures.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, to your point, you're trying to get to that peace of mind and confidence that, it's important and it is value additive even in itself to know there's no landmines here. Yeah. I'm not going to close this and have something, pop up that I'm going to wish I would have known about. But there's a time and a place, and there's knowing how to get there. And there's even just, to that idea of transactional versus relational, that bleeds through everything. So, if I'm getting on a due diligence call, I'm not just starting the call and going like question 1, right? Like there's an ability to build rapport with people on the other side of the table. And even leading off every discussion with, we want to see this deal get done. We're not here to be an obstacle to your deal. Yeah. We're here to do what we need to do to get this deal done. And the bank and investors aren't going to finance this deal without confidence that, things are going to be okay. Yeah. So we have a job to do here, but that doesn't mean, you can't do it in a way that you're building rapport, you're building trust, and that you're not, you can apply a sense of practicality of like, do we really need to jump down that rabbit hole? Is that really going to add comfort to anybody? Yeah. Or, can we skip that? And I think when you run into advisors who can apply that litmus test of maybe we can skip that, is where that starts to fall apart.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I get asked a lot, when is the lender going to require a quality of earnings report? And the loose guidance I tend to give them is, obviously it depends. Anytime you ask me, anybody, any sort of banking question, the answer is going to be it depends.
For sure.
But I usually kind of say, $3 to $4 million, I think you should probably seriously think about it, but also recognize too that it's your own due diligence too. So if you don't care about it, you probably should ask yourself, why does the lender care so much about it? But this is a long lead up. My question is, what's your perspective? And when do lenders, is there a dollar size where you tend to see almost a universal requirement for QVs?
I don't know that universal requirement is ever, to your point on your answer is always it depends. I think I might borrow that and just say it depends. But I think where, I often advocate for the idea of financial due diligence is that if all you think you're getting is a quality of earnings report to take to your bank, and that's what you think financial due diligence is, you haven't experienced financial due diligence done properly. We have never done a deal where we haven't added at least 3 times our deal fee in value to that deal. So, the right advisor is going to find value for you through that process. Plus, then you're just going to get the peace of mind and the requirement to check the box for your banker and everything else. But it shouldn't just be a check the box exercise. And I think that's often what it's been devolved to and commoditized to. But I think the right advisor is going to find ways to make sure that that process is value added to you. In terms of, bank requirements, I would say it's a little bit all over the map, because you can say, there's a certain size and scale of deal where it's an automatic, but you could also argue on some of those larger deals, the quality of financial information inherent in that business is such that, the real risk underlining those earnings is arguably maybe less. So it's sometimes counterintuitive, but sometimes it is some of the smaller enterprise values where it's like, they've never done anything more than a notice to read or a compilation report. The accounting is in a shoebox in a closet somewhere. And so it's like, okay, well, this might not be a high, dollar lending amount, but we don't have a lot of confidence in the underlying numbers. So we need to dig through that. And then to your point, sometimes there's just the risk of like, look, this is a certain size of business, the QV standard. So it kind of just falls everywhere in between.
Yeah. No. Okay. Fair enough. How about you personally? We're running a little long, so I'll skip some of this stuff. But so you personally,
Yep.
Former competitive hockey player, CPA, CBV, mid-market investment banker. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I think for me, it's always just been an enjoyment of the journey. And so, I've always kind of looked at every experience in life in terms of who is that developing me to be as a person. And I was raised by a single mom who was an entrepreneur. And so she ran a business out of the house so she could put food on the table and also take care of me and be around. And I watched that, and I watched her be able to work with a bunch of different entrepreneurs over her time. And it always reminded me, when I was in high school at a hockey practice, and I'm thinking about like, oh man, I was up at 5 a.m. for like dryland training, then school, and then this practice, and got a bunch of homework to do tonight. In my head, it's just all piling up, and I'm stressed. And it's kind of prime rush hour to get home from hockey practice, and we have to make this left turn at a T in a road, and there's a mall on the other side of the road, and it's backed up for blocks. And I'm looking at this, and I'm going, great, we're going to be stuck in this. And my mom avoids getting into the traffic turn and goes straight. And my immediate reaction, admittedly, I'm embarrassed about this, in my head was like, F sakes. Like, I have so much to do, and you've just missed this turn, and now we're going to be even longer to get home. And my mom literally just drove straight through the green light, pulled a U-turn in the mall parking lot, turned right to go the direction we needed to go left, gone. And I remember just sitting there for a moment and being like, she didn't cut anybody off. She didn't impede anybody else, but she just saw a different path. And to me, I think there's so much spirit of entrepreneurship of, that there's the line, but I see a different way through, and I'm going to just take that. And so I'd always kind of built my life around the idea of, I'm going to want to find my own path one day. What experiences do I need, and who's the person I need to become, so that if I am going to hang a shingle, I can actually add value to that situation and have the credibility to do that. And so, as much as I made comments earlier around not seeing being within the larger institutions as being sustainable for me and what I wanted for the long term, harder to find a better place to start. The training grounds and the experiences that they offer are really second to none. And so the opportunity to have spent as long as I did within the big four firms and the big banks, and work on, $10 billion plus deals, and work on deals all around the world, and all the things I was able to do with that. empowers me to be able to do what I do now. And so I think
that's hindsight talking.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's lots of folks who, when I was so fortunate when I was early in my career, that there were people who were willing to take me for coffees or breakfast or lunch and just, what are you thinking? Because I've never had a I had a light bulb moment, like this is what I want to do, right? And I think there's a certain comfort to even just when the shoe's on the other foot and I give advice, the idea you don't have to have it all figured out. But I do think there's a certain pay it forward mentality where I do want to take people for coffees or lunches or anyone who wants that advice. And I always just try and frame it in the same lens that was told to me of think about the experiences you're getting and the person you're becoming. Don't be, fussed about comp or title or all these things. Like appreciate it's a journey and enjoy it along the way.
Takes some maturity to get there. But.
For sure.
Okay. Final advice for the audience. Obviously transaction and advisory related.
I think I'll leave the audience with the idea of it takes a team. And so part of what I enjoy about transactions is they're high stakes. To your point, they can get emotional. There's a lot on the table. For vendors, that's their entire retirement and nest egg and legacy. There's a lot at play, and that's part of why I love deals is it matters. And if I think assembling the best team that you can and people that you can trust to be there when it matters, and build a bit of a village, if you will, like even just talk to other people who have done similar deals and ask them if you can call them partway through and
definitely never take advice from somebody who hasn't done what you're trying to do.
You do sometimes get the proverbial like, oh, I talked to my neighbor and whatever, right? But I think there's, as much as I'm going to try and avoid sounding like I'm plugging professional service providers too much, there is an idea of we do what we do for a reason. And, the business transitions forum, often there's a line that gets said of more on the legal side of, the person who's done your minute book for, the last 20 years, who's never done a deal in their life, shouldn't be the lawyer running your deal. Like, go get yourself an actual M&A lawyer. And, just to kind of piggyback on that, due diligence is basically being an M&A accountant. And so go get someone on your team who's going to understand how to cross T's, dot I's, and get that deal across the finish line.
Trust advisors, it must be a function of the type of people that I kind of bring onto this thing, but that is 3 out of 4 guests have said the exact same thing. And know what you know and recognize what you don't, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And be willing to leverage other people's time and expertise.
Well, there's just the idea of opportunity cost. You're good at what you're good at.
Oh my God. I don't even put my Christmas lights up.
No, like I've, we're, as I mentioned with the website, like we've hired the people who are the best at what they do because that's not what I do. Yeah. And recognize where your strengths stop and start and go get the people who have strengths where you have weaknesses. And that's how you're going to just build the best businesses and get the best results. You're going to get out what you put into things.
Right on. Where can people find you online?
So our website is www.kalostransactions.ca or just info@kalosllp.ca, and feel free to shoot us a note.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for doing this. 53 minutes, so longer than probably intended, but it was fun.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.